Welcome to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. Strike! The 80-20 Coaching Masterclass, our weekly get-together where coaches go from new to good and good to great. Mastering the fundamentals and the art of coaching.
Welcome, everyone. Coach Bo here. Let's elevate our coaching game. But first, I hope you all are having a wonderful holiday season, a great New Year's, always a great time of year, and baseball season not too far away, which is another awesome time of year. Always great being here, our weekly get-together. In today's episode, I'm going to share 3 strategies to being a great assistant coach. I got this question from one of you, one of the listeners, and it was along the lines of, what are some ways to successfully be an assistant coach when working with a head coach that might not be as open to new ideas, maybe a little more stubborn, it's kind of their way or the highway, or things along those lines. And I'm going to share 3 strategies, and you can even branch off of these 3 strategies or build off of these 3 base strategies to be a great assistant coach, a productive assistant coach, a helpful assistant coach, an assistant coach that moves the needle when it comes to player skill development, team growth, even if you have a, let's say, hard-headed head coach, a head coach that is just not open to your ideas on certain topics or certain ideas like pitch selection or the pitching delivery or how to run a practice, how to run drills. So about 15 years ago, I was asked to help a travel outfit out. It was connected to the Pony League, but it was their travel version of Pony, their competitive branch of the Pony. And there were teams at every level, and I would go out and help the coaches. Out of the half a dozen coaches and teams that I helped, only 2 of the coaches were open-minded and would willingly, without any friction, implement the tips and strategies that I recommended. Shocking, right? Somebody who played professional baseball, played high-level college baseball. Even at that time, I had coached for almost a decade, players drafted, players getting college scholarships to Division I programs. I'd coached players at the 6U all the way up to the major league level. And here were these coaches that had nothing to do with baseball except that they played 30 years earlier when they were younger. One was working for a restaurant chain. The other one had a construction company. One was a CPA. Great jobs, but nothing to do with baseball. And here I was, somebody who was day in and day out coaching baseball. Only 2 of the 6 teams or coaching staffs were open-minded. It was very shocking, but it wasn't about me or them. It was about getting the kids better. So I had to get creative, and it forced me to get creative as an assistant coach. Not just an assistant coach, but really an outsider. The second tip that I share today stems from that learning experience. Because when I got out there, I was just trying to give tips out on everything. It didn't dawn on me that these coaches who didn't have much experience in baseball wouldn't listen to somebody who has a ton of experience in baseball. But I quickly found out that the ego can really get in the way of a lot of things. It's odd because I don't think any of these guys go into the dentist and then stop the dentist halfway through a procedure and be like, I think you should do it this way, or I don't think that's the way to do it. Or I saw a YouTube video and the dentist said this is better. But for whatever reason, when it comes to youth baseball, there's this phenomenon that because we played some baseball 20 years ago, or we played some high school ball, or even some college ball, then thus we got all the answers. Now, that is what it is. And instead of changing the head coaches or changing the coaching staffs that we're working with, we have to work around that, right? It's easier to change our approach than to change them. So here are 3 strategies to being a great assistant coach. I wish I would have known these going in. I had to learn them the hard way, but my struggles hopefully will benefit all of you, give you a much more direct path to being a successful assistant coach. Now, if you're a head coach, it's very important that you listen closely to these 3 strategies so you can guide your assistant coaches. Now, if you're by yourself, then this doesn't really apply, but most teams always have at least a second coach. They should. In fact, in the coaching plan, my preseason plan, it's got the email that you should send out. It's all scripted out, team rules/standards, all scripted out, ready for you to print and use. But it also has a preseason checklist. One of the first things I recommend doing, it's almost borderline a requirement, is to reach out to every set of parents and get them to commit to helping out the team in one way or another during the season. And there's no better way to help the team than to come out and be a coach at practice. I'm huge as managers to recruit other coaches, even just dads or moms. They don't need to know anything about the game, but having them out there at practice, They can learn things. If anything, they can help kind of manage, shepherd the players, the drills. They can be facilitators. They don't need to be experts. Now, 3 strategies for those of you that are assistant coaches. Number 1, praise the players that the head coach, the manager, doesn't praise. This takes some awareness, right? So have the awareness. Maybe after a couple practices, you start to see a pattern. The manager, the head coach gives 80% of the praise to 20% of the kids. It's almost like a negative aspect of the 80-20 principle. Or maybe they just neglect giving praise to 3 or 4 kids, or maybe 3 or 4 practices have gone by and you feel like there are a couple kids that just haven't been given any praise, although they've been doing something right. Maybe a subtle thing they're doing right, a subtle improvement, maybe just a hustle, maybe they picked up something, helped out. So number 1, look to praise the players that aren't getting much praise or attention from the head coach. Number 2, find areas neglected by the head coach and coach those up. So find a component, a part of the game, a part of practice that's getting neglected by the head coach. Now, it may be getting neglected because it's not on the coach's radar, the manager's radar. It also may be something they don't feel comfortable coaching or confident coaching, so they just kind of ignore it, or they don't really touch on it very much or coach it up. Every manager, head coach has their strengths, their comfort zones. So look for things that are outside of that comfort zone, outside of that zone of confidence, and look to coach those areas up. Use the stuff on the 80-20 baseball website. Use all the episodes on this podcast and find ways, even if it's just 1 or 2 simple strategies, to coach up those areas that are neglected by the head coach. So I remember 15 years ago, I was coaching in Irvine, California, this pony league, their competitive branch, and there were 4 dads of a team, a 10-year-old team. There were 4 dads coaching. They were great guys, super nice, but they had their way. They had been together for like 3 years. They had their way of doing it. I think what hurt them is that they finished in first place their first year ever doing it. And I think that kind of stunted their willingness to get better, to grow. So it was hard to find areas that weren't getting coached up because there were 4 dads out there that were very hands-on and involved and doing a really good job in a lot of ways. And there were only 12 kids on the team. So it was hard to find an area, but I found one. They never coached up their first baseman. You can go to 8020baseball.com. I have a video on there of how to coach up the first baseman. And you'll quickly see that the first base position, especially at the youth level, can save more runs than any position. It can save and prevent more runs that the other team scores than any position out there outside of pitching and catching. In fact, the first baseman, by being coached up correctly, could have a bigger impact, a bigger defensive impact than any player, of course, outside of the pitcher and catcher, more than the shortstop, second base, center field, third base. So after a couple practices of kind of getting pushed aside and my tips were getting dismissed out of hand, I started looking around for areas that I could coach up. And that was one of them. And then the throwing routine. They didn't want to be out there for the throwing routine. These coaches wanted to talk and do their coaching talk during the throwing routine. I'm not a big fan of that. Sometimes we have to do that, but I'm not a big fan of using the throwing program, the throwing routine. Some teams call it a throwing progression as a time to talk as coaches or amongst the coaches to figure out what you're going to do that day at practice. I think that should be done beforehand via text message, a group message, email, or talked about at the practice before or at the end of the game before. But nevertheless, those are the 2 areas I hit on. And I told myself, these are going to be positions and areas that they excel at. I want the throwing on this team to see a marked improvement, to see a big improvement. So I took over the throwing routine, which, hey, they thought was great because they wanted to be over kind of organizing practice during that time. It wasn't something they were all interested in coaching. And all I did during the defensive drills is just stand over by first base because none of those coaches were ever over there. They were working with the shortstops, middle infielders. They were hitting the ground balls. They might have been helping the third baseman. They weren't over at first base. So I went over to first base. I didn't have to butt in on any of the coaches. I just coached them up. And the things that got better the fastest, first base defense and the throwing accuracy. Now, the coaches of this team, they were doing a lot of good things, and that team was getting better in every area. But after a month, the manager came up and said, hey, our first basemen are so much better, and they're so much better than any other first baseman in the league. They're playing first base different than traditionally coached up, the conventional way. They're saving us a ton of bad throws over there. Their footwork around the base, and how they're thinking of radius, how they're thinking about stretch to the ball. They're stretching to the throw, not to the thrower, because we know that's not the same thing a lot of times. And the throwing accuracy was getting better, noticeably better. They started to really notice it after a few months. But in the grand scope of things, that's pretty quick. What do you think started happening after that? Well, of course, when I had other tips to share about the hitting approach, about utilizing the drag butt more often and how to set that up in the process for that. The pitching delivery tips, pitching mechanic tips, their ears were open because I'd proven myself. So we have to have proof, right, that we can coach. And we get that proof not by telling the manager, the head coach, we know what we're saying or we know what we're doing, but by showing them the proof and them seeing the proof out there in the game. Number one, praise the players that the head coach, the manager doesn't praise often, or look for those players that aren't getting a lot of loving and praise them. So it evens it out. And in fact, this just works good because head coaches, managers can't praise and pay close attention to all the players all the time. And that's where the assistants come in and fill those voids, those gaps. Praising those players that don't get much praise from the head coach. And this might be at one practice. Maybe towards the end of practice, there's a player that hasn't gotten the attention of the head coach at all. Spent an hour and a half, hasn't received any attention from the manager. That's a good time to step up. It doesn't have to be over a course of a month or a season. This could be within a practice. Number two, find those areas of the game, those areas of practice that are neglected or not really of interest to the manager, and coach those up. Now, it's not a bad idea to ask and say, hey, do you mind if I go coach up this or that? That's not a bad way to approach it. So get the head coach to say yes. That's always the preferred path. Now, I didn't do that in the story that I was sharing with you a minute ago, but I think I had an easier in because they knew my resume. But even then, I still had to work around and find those neglected areas. But it doesn't hurt to ask the head coach, the manager, hey, do you mind if I coach up the first baseman during this drill? Do you mind if I coach up the right fielders during this drill? So find an area that you can coach up that the head coach doesn't want to coach up or just isn't confident in coaching or doesn't know how to coach up. And the third strategy, there are more strategies, but the third strategy that I want to share here, these are the three really big, really impactful strategies that are super useful. So the third strategy to being a great assistant coach, share ideas that tweak the head coach's drills subtly to make them more efficient and more game-like. Now, I want to be very clear. You're not messing with the drill itself, like the drill design in that. It's not the big overarching design of the drill. All right. Because that starts encroaching, right? You get that ego, the coach, you're going to get pushed back. You're messing with my drill. Hey, this is my drill. So when you get to a point where you feel comfortable with this is not the first move I would make. I would hit the other two first, and then this would be the third one. Analyze the manager's drills that they like. Analyze it, assess it, and ask yourself, where can this drill be more efficient? How can this drill be more game-like? Of course, if there's an area where the drill could be safer, that needs to be addressed immediately. Safety issues need to be addressed right away. But when it comes to making the drill more efficient or more game-like, you're essentially just taking their drill and putting it on steroids. You're not changing their drill. You're just elevating their drill. And you can even say, hey, this is a great drill. I love it. I love it so much. I want to get more reps in it. This drill you have, coach, is great. Actually, in fact, I like your drill so much. I want to get more reps out of it. If they like their drill and you propose getting more reps of their drill, they'd be crazy to say no. So find ways to make the drill more efficient, a higher amount of quality reps. So you're not changing their drill at all. You're just getting more reps into it. And the players win. It's a win-win. And if you feel comfortable with taking a step further, adjust it to make it a little more game-like. Maybe they got a great ground ball drill or whatever. And you say, coach, I'm going to have a stopwatch. I'm going to add a base runner to this ground ball drill to make it more game-like. Hey, coach, you don't mind if I stand over here with a stopwatch and tell the players, hey, you got to field that ball and make the play in under 4 seconds. So that's game-like because in a game, there's pressure from the runner. A ground ball is a time-bound action. Our fielders can't take their sweet time fielding it, triple pumping, shuffle, 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 and throw. Those runners are booking it down the line. They got to be quick with it. So you take their ground ball drill, for example, and this is just one example, and you say, hey, I'm going to add a stopwatch to it. Is that okay, coach? I love this drill. I like how we're working it. Hey, let's add a little game-like pressure to it. And again, you could always say, hey, this drill is really good. Can we add a little challenge to it? Can we add a little competitive nature to it? So it comes across as a complementary piece, a complementative piece. It's an addition rather than a big change. So think adding to their drill, improving their drill without really changing it or changing as little as possible. So those are 3 strategies right there to being a great assistant coach. Praise those players that don't get a lot of attention from the manager. How about coach up those players that don't get a lot of coaching up from the manager? Number 2, find areas that are neglected by the manager, the head coach. Find those areas and coach those up. It's one coach. They can't coach everything, and they may not want to coach everything. They may not know how to coach everything. Find those areas and start coaching those up. And number 3, look for subtle improvements, especially increasing the efficiency of the drill that the coach already likes and uses. All right. Send me your questions, Coach Bo, 8020baseball.com. That question right there came from one of you. How can I be a good assistant coach when I'm with a manager, head coach that kind of wants to do it their way? Next week, we're going to talk daddy ball. We're going to talk about daddy ball, and this comes up a lot. I do think there's some misunderstandings with this term, and we're going to break it down a little bit next week, what it is, how to avoid it, some workarounds, some things to keep in mind when it comes to daddy ball. That is a very common topic of conversation in the youth baseball community. So I look forward to seeing you all back next week. You should all be very proud of yourself for being here, trying to be better coaches. That motivates me to come each week and bring you my A game so you can go out there and continue to bring your players your A game, which I know you're doing. So until next week, let's keep taking care of our foundations, our health, getting sleep, hydrated, getting some exercise in, even if it's just a 20-minute power walk or a little jog before practice or in the morning. Let's take care of those foundations, our health, so we can be at our best for our families, our close friends, our team, our players. Let's take this information out there. Let's put it into play. And until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. We got this. Now, let's take the field.